This is your Thursday Fantasy PSA. Remember to take all your Thursday night players out of your flex spot. Thank you and have a nice week. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Rugby with Pads. Today we have your slightly delayed show, thanks mainly to the British transport infrastructure. I was waylaid a massive amount from Manchester coming back home yesterday, which meant I just had to take a bit of time for myself and just get everything sorted. So delays happened on the show. I'm sorry. I realise that it's not your guys' fault. You don't have to suffer from my tortures, but just let you know that it would have been quicker for me to fly to New York or to Paris and then to Stansted than it would have been to get home on the trains last night. It was a long one for sure, but that's all said and done. Today is Thursday. This will be coming out on Thursday, so don't worry. And today we are going to go over our theme players. And the theme is injuries. Injuries happen. They suck. They suck really bad. And there's been a lot of them recently. I hope none of you had to watch live the injury that happened to Nick Chubb. It was absolutely dreadful. I didn't go back and watch it. I've seen the outcomes of it, and it's not pretty. But these kind of things happen in a very violent sport, and there are so many injuries, minor niggles, otherwise people going questionable, and that's the thing we have to cope with as fantasy football players. We shouldn't ever get mad at the players. I wouldn't recommend anyone go to Twitter and start spewing vitriol. And there was a lot of hatred for Alexander Mattison last week, but that's a much more serious matter. This is a game. We take our licks as those guys do. They get paid millions to do it. We don't have to pay anything to enjoy this sport if we don't want to. So, but we just have to manage through it. And long story short, we're going to talk about injury fallout and players who are going to benefit from injuries. And there are players, I think, who are going to benefit for injuries. Either they're going to be next man up, or the situation is just going to change for them, and players who I don't think are going to maybe take advantage of the situation they're going to be in. But before we do that, let's look at how we did last week. Last week we were talking about what we thought we knew, and maybe we were a bit naive, I think. So we had about 14, 15 players that we looked at here. There are some players who I'm going to cancel out basically because they're injured. So I had one guy who I thought was going to do great, got injured, did okay, got injured, and one guy who didn't even appear. So we're going to cancel out those. We're going to take our take our wins as well as our losses there. But let's take a look at how we did. And there were some great performances last week. There were some guys who completely outperformed their expected totals. I mean, there was people like Josh Dobbs, etc. But we weren't focused on those. Those are the guys we were focusing on. We wanted to focus on the guys who we thought was starting a trend and starting to really get up there. So let's start with Dalton Kincaid. Not a huge name there, but I think is starting to see more targets around the end zone. He did okay last week. He didn't actually get in the end zone, but he was targeted. I think he had a positive positive game, especially against the Las Vegas Raiders, where they were just passing it a lot, but then they end up running it a lot. It's just great game script. Sometimes that happens. David Montgomery was unfortunately injured, but in that injury he did get 12 plus. As was Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb got injured, so I'm kind of cancelling that one out as well. Tua did fantastically, as predicted. I think we know that he has a powerful tandem in Tyreek Hill, who we'll talk about a bit later, and Jalen Waddle when he's available as well. And we had Anthony Richardson, who got injured, but was still good. So all this is kind of trending to where we want to talk about today. Romeo Dobbs was our only kind of real one that whiffed. Oh, actually, Ridley as well. He whiffed a little bit this week. It is weird. I saw someone say that if you had Christian Kirk, you played him in the first week because you thought there was going to be a level of consistency from last season, and then week 2, sorry, week 1 you played him, and then week 2 you didn't because he whiffed on week 1, and he actually went wild. It's you can't predict that offense, and with Trevor Lawrence being so terrible in the end zone, I think Ridley just couldn't quite get it going, and maybe that's still a little bit of rust from basically not playing for 2 seasons as well. So we did okay on the positive side, and I think we're better at predicting players who are going to be bad, players to avoid. We missed on Kirk Cousins. I thought he was going to be terrible. He did fantastically in a weird game. I can't believe the Vikings are 0-2 in that complete turnaround from last year where they were winning all those one-score games. Now they seem not to be. I did say Justice Hill you shouldn't play. I did say you shouldn't play Lockett. I was wrong there. He balled out thanks to an overtime victory and a very, very impressive play there. So maybe I was a bit wrong by Lockett. Maybe he's willing to take a hit. Actually, no, he wasn't really willing to take a hit, but he was willing to put his body on the line, I guess. You know, kind of same thing. Eckler, I didn't think was going to have a poor performance. I did think was going to have a poor performance. He was out. I think that was the signs were there. That was a Saturday call, I think. Higbee didn't do well. Howell didn't do well. Bryce Young did poorly, and Najee, I think, continued his poor form. So overall, we're 9 for 14 on this one, 64%. That takes us for 18 for 27, which is a weird number because we don't do the same number each week for the season. So you can trust me 2/3 of the time, 66.6, Devil Horns, guys. Yeah, you can trust me that much. So let's see if we can, beat those numbers a little bit. We got 69 in the first week. Let's see how we're going to do this week. And each week we learn more about players, but I think equally each week becomes more unpredictable until you hit a balance maybe mid-season when players are conditioned enough that they're maybe not going to suffer injuries quite as much, but you just know where they're going to go. But as the body wears, you sometimes get more injury risk there. So it's all a bit of a weird journey, but I think early injuries are likely, especially with players not playing the preseason nearly as much. You see teams entirely not starting their starters for the first, all 3 of the preseason games, or 4 if you're in the Hall of Fame game. I thought it was interesting watching Hard Knocks and seeing the Jets actually play some of their starters in the 4th game against was it against the Giants? It was against the Giants. That obviously didn't help a huge amount with Aaron Rodgers going out, and they've got a list of injuries as well. But let's take a look at players who this week I think are going to benefit or not benefit from the opportunity provided them by injury. Obviously, we're not talking about injured players here. We're talking about players who the situations have either improved or not so in the mix here. We're going to start with a name who I never thought he'd make it on this list because I think he's so mediocre. He was mediocre last year and he's been mediocre so far, but I think he's trending upwards. I don't think the tape really talks about it. I just got a feeling about the situation. So this is my onion hanger this week. I'm going to talk about Derek Carr. Derek Carr is going away with the Saints to Green Bay. They have problems in the running game. They've still got Kamara suspended. Jamal Williams is out. Kendra Miller is coming back from injury. So they're going to be relying on Tony Jones potentially as the number 1. Maybe Kendra Miller's going to make it there as well. But I think what you'll see, and what you saw last week, is they leaned on the passing game, and he's got a lot of options. I mean, Chris Olave is an absolute monster. He's got Jawan Johnson and Taysom Hill and every tight end possible because I think they've got Jimmy Graham still on the team as well. They've got Michael Thomas, Mr. Slampman, who I think he's not wowing, but he's not doing too badly either. And the emergence of Rashid Shaheed, which is a fantastic name last week. I think what this means is they're going to be way more pass happy, and Green Bay's defense have played out of their skin, but they did let a lot. I mean, a lot. They didn't get. I don't think they got any receptions last week. Interceptions, sorry, against the Falcons, but they did let up a lot of yards. I think they're playing more of a preventative defense there. So it'd be interesting to see how that works. They've got a couple of stars. They've definitely got a couple of stars in the secondary with Jair Alexander. But I think Derek Carr is wise enough to just take what he's given. I think we're going to see a high passing volume, which will lead to a lot of screen passes, and opportunity in the flat game. So I'm going with Derek Carr to potentially score a couple of touchdowns and to outscore what you think is a mediocre 15 points. I think he's going to be 20 plus points this week, and someone that I would be looking to start based upon the injury to the running game, promoting the passing game. That I think he's probably more familiar in those shootouts. He can throw it deep, and we saw that last year when he was in the Raiders with the Raiders. So I'm hoping he's going to have a good week, especially for some of my teams where I'm having to actually start him. We did mention we were going to talk about Tyreek Hill, and only because, to be fair, come on, I know I'd said let's not give too many gimmies and too many superstars in this, but give me this one. Come on, it's a weird week. We have Tyreek Hill big here because Waddle was actually looked in concussion protocol. He's questionable, potentially even doubtful for this game. I need to check on the injury status there. But I think in that case, you would think, they're going to hyper target Tyreek Hill, and I don't think anyone can really contain Tyreek Hill. I think that's maybe his superpower. He's just that good. And a Denver offense who look poor, they are going to scheme him open in so many different ways. I think they're going to use Tyreek Hill massively. He's already said he's kind of put in 2 years on his contract, and that's it. So they're going to try and get him as close to 2,000 yards as possible. I think he's had I don't know how many yards he had, 215 last week, or was it the week before? I think he's over 400 yards for the season. I think we're going to see a 150-yard performance plus from Tyreek Hill. Maybe add a couple of scores in there because they would have gone to Waddle otherwise. But he is going to tear up that now average-looking Denver defense. And we'll go with another wide receiver who is a bit of a superstar, I guess. We're going to go with Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson seems to be the only bright spark in that offense, and New York Jets need to bounce back. I think they're going to have to throw it. I feel like with Dalvin Cook not having quite the spark that you would expect, and Breece Hall still recovering from his injury, I think they're going to have to go to the passing game. They're going to be potentially playing from behind, and New England are going to try and take away one of the aspects. I think what they're going to take away is probably going to be the running game. Because of that, I think they're going to end up having to lean on the passing game. And New England were rolling out like third string cornerbacks, so they have some injuries and some niggles there. So in that perspective, I think Garrett Wilson will take advantage of the injury. And even though, the injury that I'm really talking about here is the ones that are happening in the New England very thin secondary, but also to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is a dink and dunk kind of player. Yes, he can sling it deep when he needs to, but he's going to retain the ball when he's on the field. Zach Wilson is probably going to take some more chances, and I think he's going to be pushed that way. I think he's got the backing of his coaching. He's got an interesting locker room there that I think Aaron Rodgers is still giving advice and being a part of, doing that kind of extended mentorship. I can see there being some big chunk plays for Garrett Wilson, and he's going to be one of the bright sparks in that New York Jets team. Right, that's a lot of positivity, some big names there. Let's look at negativity. And Saquon Barkley has been ruled out officially for this week. Matt Breida looks in line to be the starter. I think he was announced as a starter against San Francisco tonight, in fact. So if you've got Matt Breida, you want to put him in tonight. But I wouldn't if you don't have to. I think Matt Breida is going to be a difficult sell for me. I don't think he is nearly as dynamic as you need him to be in this struggling New York team. I think they're going to have to rely on Daniel Jones and other players around him to make something with Barkley out. I think it's going to be very one-dimensional, and going up against San Francisco at home, it's probably the toughest defense, if not the second toughest defense behind Dallas in the entire league. Right, we're going to take a very, very quick break and come back shortly, and then we'll run through the rest of our injury fallout theme players. But a message from our sponsors in the meantime. They're not really sponsors. Right, competition time, guys. Rules are on the screen as you see them now, but part one is we're trying to drive subscriptions to rugbywithpads.com. You can find all the information here, but for every single subscription you make from £1 a month, you can get all the benefits that you would do on a normal Patreon. But as you go up, you can also get merch with it as well. And this is how we're selling our merch that you've seen me wearing during some of these YouTube videos as well. If you enter for as little as £1, you'll be entered into the competition. There's bonus entries for higher tiers as well. Now, we'll announce the winner of that on the pod once we've got a minimum of 10 subscribers, and then part two comes in. So get ready already. Go to youtube.com@rugbywithpads, click subscribe and comment on any of the videos. And there's a fair few. We bring out the videos at the same time as we do on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you'll be entered into a competition to win either a t-shirt or a pop socket. It's free, but we must make sure that part one is won first. Let's drive that traffic over to rugbywithpads.com, and the draw announcements will be on the pod. I'll keep you updated with what we're doing and put some stuff on socials. Right, back to the pod. And after a very short break where you probably didn't hear from any sponsors, because we don't have any here. We are sponsor-free, an independent podcast over at Rugby with Pads Towers. Let's get back into the mix, shall we? And let's run down some more positive names, because we haven't got as many negative projections, because I think injury opportunity is opportunity here. So let's take a look. And we're going to go to another wide receiver, and we're going to go with Michael Pittman. Now, I think Michael Pittman, he had a really good game last week. I can't remember his exact scoreline, but even with Anthony Richardson out, who he seems to be the favoured target of, which is really great, you've got Gardner Minshew, who I think is one of the better backups in the league, and he was good enough to make Michael Pittman relevant. I don't think the Colts have such a great defense or any other part of their game that they're going to be able to rely on that part. So they're going to need to have a well-rounded passing attack as well, which means I think Michael Pittman is going to be the alpha in there. And he is definitely the most talented. And against a Baltimore secondary that I think is weak, to say the least, it's old and a little bit injured, I think he's going to have a good game this week. Shoving through, we haven't talked about any tight ends yet. And you know what? I'm going to give me another gimme. Come on. I'm trying to improve my stats here. Let's go with Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce, isn't he? He's not going to be bad ever. Well, unless he's injured, which he was for the first week. But they go to Chicago. Chicago looking like the worst team in football at the moment. They're looking like they may be alongside the Arizona Cardinals fighting for that number one spot. With the Texans as well. I think they have got a couple of their picks as well. So we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, Chicago away at Kansas City. Kansas hasn't been great, but you know who has been great? Travis Kelce, 18 points in his last game. He's going to be great no matter what, and he is back from his injury, and I think they're going to just unleash him. There doesn't seem to be any of the pass catchers of a note over there. Everyone's a bit part player. Kadarius Toney hasn't lived up to billing. Sky Moore's looking interesting, as is Rashee Rice, but you know they're big plays. He's not the regular guys. You want volume, especially at a tight end position, which is at the top, and you've been expecting a lot from these guys at the top, and then nothing for a big long way, and then you get people who are just not worth your time. Travis Kelce, let's stick with some positives here. And we'll go on to one last positive as well, and I think it's a bright spot in a very poor team at the moment. We're going to go look at George Pickens. Now, Deontay Johnson is out, which means there is an absence of a lot of targets. Deontay Johnson was the target monster who couldn't get into the end zone. Now he can't get into the end zone because he's on IR. I think that means he's out for a minimum of 4 games. George Pickens has shown something, and I think he has got a relationship with Pickett, who is serviceable at best. He's one of those average quarterbacks, so like your Derek Carr, your Andy Dalton, those kind of guys who is going to have up and down games. But he can sling it when he needs to, and he's a bit more mobile. And I think that plays to George Pickens getting a bit more open downfield. Still a bit suspect around Pittsburgh's O-line, but their defense keeps them in games. And I think against Las Vegas, who can be torn up in the secondary, they are just not good. The only defensive bright spot is Max Crosby, especially with some of the issues they've been having off the field with some of their other stars. Yeah, I can see George Pickens having a really nice game here. And I would hope that Matt Canada doesn't try and do a load of end arounds with Calvin Austin or, God forbid, Allen Robinson. I think this is George Pickens' week this week. Right, let's run through a bunch of people who we don't think are going to, and we'll finish off strong. So let's do it that way. So, you know what? We just talked about one Pittsburgh Steeler. Let's talk about another, Calvin Austin, who I mentioned in this last sentence. For the same reason, I think George Pickens is going to be great. I think they're going to focus on him being great, and they're going to target him. I also think it could be a really good game for Najee Harris to put his name back on the map. So I actually had him initially in my negative projections here, but I'm feeling like Najee Harris could have a bit of a comeback game here. But Calvin Austin isn't isn't really showing me anything. I think he's going to be one of those guys who is a gadget player, a bit like McCole Hardman was back in the Chiefs and it is now at the Jets as well. Just don't think he's going to get volume to be relevant enough, even though he has piqued people's interests over the last couple of weeks. At the running back position, we've got Josh Kelly. It looks like Austin Eckler's going to be out again, and you would think Josh Kelly has got a line in, but I think this guy was a professional surfer or skater. I very remember. I think he was at the Rams at one point. But even though they're going up against Minnesota, who are porous, I think it's going to be an absolute. They've got porous D as well, so it's going to be an absolutely bonkers game. I heard a stat earlier that Chargers have actually, we threw up the horns for 666 earlier, and the Chargers have actually conceded over the last two games 666. Say that with a lisp. 666 passing yards over the last two games. And I think we're going to see a massive shootout here, but I don't think it's going to involve Josh Kelly a huge amount. Maybe at the goal line, maybe he'll be okay, but he's not Eckler, unfortunately. And I think that is a big gap they have. I think maybe Josh Kelly is the one that's proving that you can't just replace a superstar running back with anyone. At tight end, a lot of people want him to do great, and I don't know why, and I don't think he will. But Njoku. Deshaun Watson has never sustained a top 20, I think, tight end, even when he was, playing his heart out playing his heart out and other things out in 2020. He was still not able to sustain a decent tight end despite a cast of fantastic people around him. I just don't think Njoku has it, and he's not in the right situation. I think they're going to struggle against Tennessee, who have a strong-ish or at least frisky defense this year. I think it's going to be a really interesting game, but I don't think it's going to go Cleveland's way this week. I think Cleveland are going to lose against Tennessee, and because of that, I also don't think Njoku's going to be. I think they're going to try and lean on something they think they have in Ford, Jerome Ford. Obviously they haven't got Chubb. They've brought in Kareem Hunt for a year, who knows the system. We'll have to see how it works, but I just think Njoku is the piece that's not quite fitting for me. And at QB, it's not really an injury, but he's in there because Kyler Murray is injured. It's Josh Dobbs, who had a bit of a game week last week. I think he scored nearly 30 points, 29 in most systems. I'm not favouring him this week, not because of the injury status or anything, but because he's going against Dallas, and I'm worried for his health. He is going to get sacked a huge amount with an offensive line who is porous. Yeah, he'll probably score a couple of things, but he will end up getting flattened. He will end up getting intercepted. Dallas are just too good. Even on the road, Dallas are just going to absolutely roll them, and their defense is going to be nasty. But back to some negative. Let's spin it back, and we'll finish on three positive notes, and they're all going to be running backs. Starting with someone who I didn't think was going to break out here, but DeAndre Swift looked really good. John, in his power rankings, said he looked swifty. I think he looked shifty. I don't think swifty is the right adjective there, John. But either way, he was brilliant last week. And on Monday Night Football against Tampa Bay, Tampa Bay are an interesting team because they're going to throw it a lot. And I think once the Eagles defense or Eagles secondary get their act together, because their D-line looks crazy, I think they're going to flatten Baker. There's probably going to be an injury somewhere. They're probably going to end up playing another guy, and it's going to look a bit messy. But DeAndre Swift is going to be the guy that they're running with. In a lackluster offense, he looked interesting. I'm also going to go with another interesting player who's breaking out, and it's Kyren Williams. Obviously, Cam Akers was injured. He was healthy scratch last week, but Kyren Williams has taken his role, and now Cam Akers is out of the building even. So I think Kyren Williams is going to continue his tear and be fantastic on that side of the ball. Yeah, I think they've got a bit of a plus matchup. Who are they playing this week? They're on Monday Night Football against the Cincinnati defense, who basically have no run defense. So I think they're going to be using a lot of Kyren Williams, and we're probably going to see a lot of Puka Nacua as well. And finally, last running back we're going to look at here. It's another one with the Lions, bent as well. I feel like all of these guys were looked at by the Lions. Well, obviously John just was there. Kyren Williams, because it was an interesting one. I don't know why it's related to the Lions there, but I feel like there is a relationship with the Lions and the Rams. So I think a lot of people thought that's where Cam Akers was going. But still, we're going to go with Gibbs. I've talked around the subject quite a lot there. But Gibbs, with Monty injured, I think they're going to finally try and use him as he should be used against Atlanta, who have a stiff D, but yeah, nothing I think the Lions will be too bothered by. So let's go through the list. The guys who I don't think are going to benefit from the injury nod, we've got Matt Breida and Njoku, Josh Kelly, Josh Dobbs, and Calvin Austin. And on the positive side, I think Derek Carr's going to get a boost. Tyreek Hill is going to be great this week. Garrett Wilson, I think, will be better than advertised. I think people will be scared and maybe taking him out of lineups. I would buy the dip. Michael Pittman, I think, is going to flourish especially if Gardner Minshew is under center there. Travis Kelce, he's bounced back from injury. George Pickens is going to make the most out of those lack of targets or those recovered targets, absent targets. Oh, you know what I mean? The targets that would have gone to Deontay Johnson now that he's on IR. DeAndre Swift is, I think, made a statement that he's the number one there in the running game, and I think they're going to run it a lot this week. Kyron Williams is going up against a weak run D, and he has no competition in Cam Akers anymore, and Gibbs is going to start being used the way he should be used now that he's out from underneath Montgomery, and yeah, I think he's going to be used the way we all wanted him to be used as well. Now, we're going to add a little segment just on the end here because it is Thursday, and I mentioned last week I started playing a game of DFS with the Fantasy Game Day app. I really enjoyed it. I didn't do particularly well last week because I left Aaron Jones in my lineup, but you know what? If you're interested in DFS, I think it's a worthwhile pick up, and you know it's the fairest odds I've seen. And again, I'm not betting man or anything like that. It's just a way I like playing because they pay out the top 20% of players. So it's not like all goes to the top. You have to enter it 100 times like you do in traditional DraftKings DFS. Have a tickle and see what you feel like. But I'm sure the guys over there would appreciate you going over and saying hello to them and taking a look at their app. It's all in the description. Again, it's not an ad. I've spoken to them over Instagram. I just like the way it looks and like the way it plays. So this week, I am going with, I'll flash it up on the screen here as well. I'm not spending my full budget. I've tried to be a bit clever here. I think Tony Pollard's going to have a great week, so I've made him my captain. You can only make effectively flex positions your captain, so skill players. You can't make QBs, they score too much. But yeah, he's going up against the Cardinals, who I think are going to have a bad time of it. Justin Herbert is going to be involved in a shootout, so I think he is going to be a winner chicken dinner over there. So for 6,000, I think he was a bargain pickup. Jahmyr Gibbs, for all the reasons I said, you buy the dip. He's a value player there. Brian Robinson, he played amazingly last week. Absolutely tore up on the floor there. So I think he's going to be, again, another one who's going to have a great week this week. Mike Williams, I just want a piece of this game. And I always like in DFS lineups and same with best ball lineups, basically any lines, I like getting a stack available, and I think there's going to be enough passing yards and opportunities for Mike Williams to really dominate against some of the smaller cornerbacks for the Vikings. And you know that Justin Herbert, as a mammoth of a man, is going to deliver to him. I think Jordan Addison is an interesting pick as well because again, you just want a piece of that, piece of that game. I would love to have had Justin Jefferson, and he would be a captain, but I think he would just blow my budget at 8,600. So, I think he's a worthwhile player to build his team around, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the top guys have Justin Jefferson as their captain, who I believe scores double in this. So you have to go and check. Bijan Robinson, I think, is still undervalued. I think he's so good, and he's scoring 20 fantasy points per game. I think you need to go after him, and I think his price will creep up after this week. And finally, I've already talked about how good he is and how good I think he's going to be this week. Travis Kelce, it's showing a lower fantasy points per game at the moment, but I think he's got a great opportunity to right the ship, and he is the number one target in that offense, and an offense that you want a piece of. You want an Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce offense there. Right, that's your lot now. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. If you're doing it on YouTube, sorry this is a bit later than usual. Remember, take your players out of your flex lineup. If you've got Thursday night player, so put them in your normal spots. You know how it is. You heard the thing at the start. You know how it goes. I might drop that in the middle as well, just to really, really hammer the point home there. If you like what we're doing here, you can follow us on all the socials at Rugby with Pads. You can follow, you can support the pod by going to www. Is anyone write www? Probably not. Rugbywithpads.com. That's our Buy Me a Coffee. You can get a membership and get some merch there. Or if you just want to get the merch without the membership, you can go to store.rugbywithpads.com and that'll take you to our Etsy shop, which is just been released recently. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you all soon on the virtual gridiron.